Hello and welcome back to RADTV. I'm Ian Henshall. Well, in this section we've got a very interesting report of a media initiative here in the UK in Manchester, and I've got Kam Sandhu, who's just back from a conference they've had. To start off with, Kam, tell us what Real Media is all about.
Real Media aims to be a platform to aggregate news from independent sources. So that's we've got lots of bloggers out there at the moment who have got lots of followers who are covering the holes that mainstream media is leaving behind, and there are huge holes in mainstream reporting. And basically we want to create a one-stop platform where you can find a feed of news from independent sources, so that's news that's not interrupted by corporate interests or advertisers or otherwise proprietor interests.
Right, and you've put your finger on several of the key issues in the media, haven't we? Proprietor interests, advertisers, sources. Okay, well, tell us about the conference, because you've just had quite an exciting launch conference, haven't you, just this last weekend?
Yeah, we had a conference in Manchester. It went really well. It was great to just get lots of speakers from who have been kind of talking about the problems with the media together, to highlight them together. And we had workshops that dealt with problems such as racism and sexism, training people up for avoiding conspiracies and things like that. So it was a good launch to start sending out the seeds about what we can do and what should happen and what problems we need to deal with.
Okay. And can you name, I mean, I think there are some sort of alternative papers in places like Manchester Mule or something like that?
Yeah, those are some organisations from Manchester have signed up, people like the Salford Star, the Manchester Mule. We are hosting a anti-Daily Mail week from the 13th to the 20th of March, for which we've got our own spoof paper going out called the Daily Whale. Right. So that's going to be around, so do look out for that. 13th to 20th of March. Right,
so I suppose you're going to have somebody doing a bit of work coordinating all this into the website. Mm-hmm. Are you going to pay them, or are we hoping for a good volunteer?
We have received a bit of funding from Network for Social Change, and we're also for the project to run long term and to be away from kind of advertiser interests and stuff like that. We are looking for donations, regularised donations. It might seem like a fairly kind of big task. We do want to pay people, and it's going to require paying people. It does seem like a big task, but we've got kind of lots of inspiration. In Scotland, there's Common Will and Common Space. Angela Haggerty came down and spoke to us, and she's the editor, and that's an independent platform that came out after the independence vote. Yeah. And it was because lots of Scots are really angry and disappointed about the way that the media covered. So they were happy to donate to an independent platform, and they've got 4-5 paid staff that are independent journalists. So, a lot of things are possible right now.
Well, Nafeez Ahmed, who's a very respected independent journalist, he's actually raising something like $2,000 a month in people just promising £1 a month. It seems that is now beginning to work for crowdfunding, a different type of crowdfunding, I think, slightly new type.
Yeah, and he was at the conference, and he's a great example of and the work that he's actually produced from that sort of income. He's done stuff about HSBC, about encroaching police powers on protest and dissent and so on. Really incredible pieces and exclusive pieces. To have that off your own back that people are interested in paying for, I think that's an appetite that's growing.
Yeah, so this could be sort of almost like the sort of daily newspaper of the alternative world.
Yeah, we can hope so.
In the end, because it's not that difficult to agglomerate news stories. Basically, it doesn't take a massive staff.
Exactly.
So have you considered the fact that Ofcom are claiming to have the right to regulate the internet?
Interesting, because they seem to have taken a bit of a backstreet role in terms of some of mainstream coverage, letting kind of mainstream media investigate themselves. So I think there'd be quite a lot of a fight back if that were to happen in terms of how many powers they had. But of course, they have things to do with fair reporting, I can understand.
Yeah, although whether it's up to them to enforce it or not is another issue. So there is a big public appetite for new media. Why do we think that? We sort of all feel that there must be, but is there any evidence that they will go to? Or at least, the general public will go to alternative sources?
Well, I think that people are already kind of searching for alternatives, and that's said through the success of independent bloggers, people like Scripts Night, and who get millions of hits a year because people trust her and they believe that she has integrity, and they return to her. And I think that's something that's really, really lacking. I think Des Friedman at the conference said that trust in mainstream journalists is somewhere between the same as estate agents and politicians. Yeah. So there's definitely a lack of trust coming from people, and especially coming towards the election, I think that's becoming more obvious. There's certain issues such as immigration, which encourages divide and rule tactics, and whereas other issues that would confront some of the interests of billionaire press owners, such as the wealth gap, such as tax evasion, such as ownership, those things aren't getting any coverage. But there are people out there who want to talk about it. There are people out there who are suffering at the hands of unjust austerity.
Absolutely.
And their voices aren't getting heard, and I think it's happening to more and more people, so that that appetite is going to grow and grow.
It's about trying to get a coalition of everybody who's been lied to by the media, isn't it, in a way?
We've got a good crowd.
We've been wondering that at RADTV. You've got people like, the Orgreave miners, you've got Hillsborough people, you've got people who are worried about David Kelly, what happened to him.
Yeah.
And the problem is they tend to sort of all slightly resent the other ones, don't they, in a way? They like to say, well, I'm a perfectly ordinary mainstream person except for my particular campaign. So then they can end up being at loggerheads a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what that news is built for. This kind of divide and rule tactic is to make people feel like there's not enough space to talk about everybody's issues, that their issue is more important than the other, or that you're better than someone else. In fact, we're all kind of suffering largely for some of the same reasons, and that's to do with who controls our information. Information is a huge fundamental key. How can people make decisions about elections and policies and things that they want and need if they don't have the right information? We're largely kind of suffering. Austerity, all of this stuff is based on the idea that there isn't enough. There's not enough. Someone's got to suffer, so it must be asylum seekers, or it must be benefit claimants, or it must be someone else. Whereas if we, take a look at it, I think, what was it, Oxfam who came out at the beginning of this year and said that the 1% now own 50% of the world's wealth, and by 2016 will own more than the 99%. That's insane. In the bottom 80% have something like 5.5% of the world's wealth. There's clearly enough, but it's in the hands of very, very few.
Something going terribly wrong.
Yeah.
And the media don't really reflect that, do they? They give it a little bit of attention from time to time, but I remember there was a big libel action years ago, and somebody accused the editor of the News of the World. They said he printed all the nudes fit to print and the news printed to fit. And that sort of is it, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Ownership. Now, we all, in the alternative media, we're all sort of aware that, ownership is very unfair. But I wonder why the BBC, which actually is supposed to be publicly owned, they seem to sing from exactly the same hymn sheet as the rest of the media.
There are kind of many problems with the BBC. First of all, impartiality doesn't exist. The idea that news can be impartial. I think there was Andrew Marr who once said, my organs of opinion were removed when I went into the BBC, but over the years you see him fawning over Tony Blair when he's making speeches about the Iraq War. So that's one thing we have to deal with, is that there isn't really impartiality involved, and also the way that it's kind of, I think they had a few reports out about the fact that they've presented climate change as kind of like a 50-50 thing, so they'll have present it like there's a chance that it doesn't happen. They present it with one person saying yes and one person saying no, and that's not really what's going on.
Well, we had somebody from the BBC down here a few months ago, and she was explaining to us off camera that one of the problems is that, according to their internal rules, if they do raise an issue, they're obliged to give it 50-50 coverage, which is why they often don't raise issues, because they know that it'll cause public anger if they give 50-50 coverage to some groups.
We could say that, but they rarely show a challenging voice to things like austerity, or when we have a platform given to our politicians to kind of put out their disinformation. I was speaking to a legal aid lawyer, and they said that the most amount of misinformation comes from the government, and the fact is they're given an automatic platform by the media and not challenged in the same way.
There's a presumption that what the government says is true, whereas for every ordinary people, and after the evidence of the Iraq War, the presumption should be that it's very questionable.
Exactly.
And they should balance that, but they don't. Well, thanks very much for coming on and talking to us, Kam. I'm no doubt we'll be going back to this subject many times in the future. In a sense, that's the raison d'etre for all of us and the real media.
Definitely.